Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to do something a little bit different. We are going to work on a 1/12 scale sculpt of Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock. You can see here the model has already been primed using StanoRes white. And we are going to get started with some Indian Shadow and Pink Flesh, both from Scale Color. And we're going to use an airbrush for this. And we're going to use a Badger Patriot 105, spraying at around 20 psi, somewhere around that. As you can see, once I get started, I usually do a little test spray. And of course, when you are airbrushing, if you are relatively new to it, that you should always start away from your project when you are starting to airbrush a surface. Now here I'm going to lay a pretty even coat of this mixture. And the mixture was approximately like a 3-to-1 type of ratio. I wanted more of that darker color versus the lighter tone, and it was just simply just to kind of lighten it up a bit and, just so it wasn't quite as light. We're going to add a little bit more pink flesh to this mixture, giving it more like a 2-to-1 or even closer to a 1-to-1. It was really kind of just mixing it to eyeball. Now I'm going to spray straight down at the head. I'm usually going at about a steeper than 45-degree angle to it so that I'm leaving just the deeper tone in the recesses so it gathers under the cheeks, under the brow, under the lips, all that. Next, we're going to switch to a Renegade Chrome. I'm going to bring the PSI down a bit, and I'm also adding a bit more pink flesh to this mixture. In fact, I think I use mostly pink flesh with a drop of the Indian Sunset, I think it was, the darker flesh tone anyway. Again, I'm spraying, trying to get mostly a straight down approach to it, but as I get towards the face, I do spray just to change the angle up ever so slightly, so it's not quite, straight down. It's more, probably more like a 20-degree angle. It's not quite a 45. It's, somewhere around that, just so I catch the face details and catch those highlights. We're going to add a little bit of golden skin to this mixture, so it's kind of probably more like a 2-1-1 kind of mixture. The golden flesh tone is just a little bit more of a yellowing. Now, as you may or may not know, Dwayne Johnson is not really this dark. He's actually, not quite that dark. He's a dark fellow, but he's not that dark. But again, this is a 1/12 scale, so this is, really just to more bring out the details of his face. African Shadow is next. I'm going to slap a little bit of this onto the palette. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to make this a shade wash. So I add about 2 drops of Liquitex Floaid and about 2 drops of acrylic thinner. I'm using MIG Ammo's acrylic thinner for this. Use a shade wash brush. I begin laying it into the eye sockets, the ears, and following along the jawline, along the back of the head. But then after a little while, I decided, nah, screw it. We're just going to, basically shade the entirety of the head. Because it's really been thinned out quite a bit, I really wasn't worried. It looks really quite dramatic at the moment here, but once it dries, it isn't quite as contrasty looking. We come back to the golden skin and pink flesh, and I do believe I threw this in as 2-to-1. So it's 2 golden to 1 pink flesh. Just the pink flesh just to kind of warm the golden, just to knock a bit of the golden tone out of it. And then this spray is pretty much straight down at the head, catching most of it. So it's, a pure kind of zenithal type of situation here. And again, with all these layers that I've been working with here, it was more of an experimentation to build up to the skin tone that I was liking, and I was liking the deep tones, and the light tone felt with this final one, it was feeling a little bit too intense, and I was losing a bit of the mid tones. So I come in with some Gilliman flesh and I load it into the airbrush, still using a Renegade Chrome, spraying it around 10-15 psi, and we basically spray in an upward motion. So I'm holding the face and I'm spraying up at the face so that I'm not totally destroying a lot of the highlight I just laid down and just getting a bit of those color shifts with the rest of the flesh. And again, the tones are quite dark, but again, this is a 1/12 scale head, so I was actually pretty happy with where I was at. Next is brown gray. This is a nice deep tone, and this is for the stubble that's on his face. And we basically begin laying it in somewhat carefully around his lip, and as well as basically it's kind of this goatee sculpt on his face. So I was just really kind of just following that, and as you can see, we're simply just working our way around that surface somewhat carefully. Where it gets up on his lip, I also am quite deliberate, and you can see I leave a little bit of a chiseling on the brush so that it has kind of the small hairs, and that way anywhere where the hair gets close to the flesh, I have those very small subtle lines in there to give the hint of, you know, hair direction and of those kind of things. Again, with a larger head like this, you have a lot of wiggle room, so to speak, as far as how you go about, you know, painting this. And we are just simply going in and filling this in. Now, again, the style of the hair and everything, that is kind of how The Rock appears nowadays, sporting the goatee, and he does have a bit of gray in his, you know, his facial hair and such. I'm adding a few drops of Liquitex Flow Aid and a drop of acrylic thinner as well. I'm using the MIG Ammo one, and I'm going to use this as a shade wash, and in a very kind of stippling kind of motion, I'm just very haphazardly laying this in just to represent, you know, obviously he shaves his head, and so that's what this is representing. Now, I'm sticking with the gray because, you know, I do want to have a bit of a mature feeling to this guy, and as I was working on this, I got the feeling like, as far as, because this is intended for the Bandai Spacemarine that I'm going to be, that I've converted this for you, hence the neck collar. I kind of imagined this head being very appropriate for like a stern guard. And as you can see, I just simply add a little bit of gray. And of course, anywhere where it builds up a little too heavy, I just simply use my finger and dab the excess off. And it gives me, you know, a bit of that randomness and throws the hints of those darker tones in there. I also follow along the jawline just to, you know, help with that. The tone of the flesh may have changed a second ago because I used a thin layer of Vallejo satin varnish just to seal in the flesh, because I knew I was going to be doing more layers here. I'm using Basilicum Gray from Citadel as contrast, and basically I'm just laying this in deliberately wherever I want the shadows. I just want to deepen up some of the little gray points here and there, because again, his facial hair isn't quite that dark, and in a lot of photographs, some areas of his face look like they're still quite dark, but he still has like a lot of gray showing forward. And again, you know, as I was painting this, I was referring to pictures of Dwayne Johnson as I was doing this. So I was going back and forth, and it was one of the photos that I had seen that he was sporting quite a bit of a goatee here. And I think in one of the recent movies, he sports a goatee as well. And I didn't want to go with a dark haired, and I thought more of the gray and such. And so again, I kind of ran with that, and yeah, I figured that was more fun. Brown gray and some white is next. We're going to slap a little bit onto the palette. I'm going to add a little bit of white to this right next to it, and I'm just going to mix the white into the dollop of gray until I was happy, and I ended up being not quite happy with that. So it's probably more of a 2-to-1 ratio of brown gray to white. And again, I'm very deliberately laying in these highlights. I'm trying to catch just the hairs on his upper lip, as well as through the core of his chin hairs, as it were. And then, of course, the hairs that come down kind of like the handlebar style mustache. I don't know what you would call that area of mustaching, goatee kind of thing, but that's really where I was going. And again, it's a slight stippling motion. I'm catching just the high points, and I'm just basically laying in this color wherever I felt it was appropriate. Again, I was referring to pictures of The Rock as I was working my way around, but again, I'm also, you know, being a bit exaggerated as well. And of course, you can see I kind of push some of the hair along his jawline as well. I add a little bit of highlights and create the impression of gray hairs along his jawline as well. I don't bother hitting the back of the head because it really wasn't necessary, as he keeps his head kind of clean shaven. So I figured, no, we're not going to worry about that. We're going to take a little bit more white, slap that onto the palette, and mix that into the little dollop. It's probably more like a 2-to-1 of white to gray. With this mixture, but it's probably more like a 2-to-1, 2 white to 1 gray. And then here it's just a very fine highlight here and there, just basically picking out some of those areas on his face where a lot of white hair appears. And so, you know, it's really not a whole lot we're laying down. And again, because of the larger scale, we can, you know, be a little bit more haphazard in our approach. Again, though, with a head like this size, It is a lot of fun. It's good practice just for, doing faces and such. And, the airbrush obviously speeds up a lot of the process, but, it was a lot of fun and doing something different. And of course, this is for my Bandai Intercessor. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Indian Shadow is next. We are going to slap a little bit onto the palette. I'm going to thin it down ever so slightly here. And this is what I'm going to use to base coat his lips. Again, it is the darker tone on his flesh, and when you really look at lips versus skin tone, they're not really a red or anything like that often. So I was going, but this color here has quite a bit of red cast to it, and I figured that would be a really good base tone. And initially, I was very happy with how it was looking, but I needed a little bit more highlight, so I take some pink flesh. Added just next to the dollop of Indian Shadow, mix it in till I got a mixture that I was kind of happy with the tone, and then begin laying highlights on just the bottom lip. I don't bother highlighting the upper lip. As I work my way through, more color is just applied to really kind of just the upper middle portion of the bottom lip. Again, that's kind of where the highlights initially would be. I take a little bit of that mixture of that white and brown gray, mix that into the mixture as well. Probably close to more like a 1-to-1, but it really was just kind of mixing it to taste kind of thing. And then these are just very, very fine little highlights I'm throwing onto just the very forward portion of the bottom lip, just so that you can kind of bring the texture out. And again, I was doing it in sort of a stippling motion, just because obviously bottom lips and lips altogether often will have a texture to them. And that's what I was emulating there. Vulpeless Pink from Citadel. I apply it to the palette and I thin it down just a little bit, and then a very thin layering right on the lips again, just to bring a bit more of the reddish tone. I also do the eyeballs as well, because again, this is going to be to represent the pink around the eye. And then once I did that, I was like, well, okay, I'm pretty happy with how that looks. He gives him kind of a demon-like look, but I thought, you know what, let's take a little bit more of the color, and we are going to thin it down, and we're going to apply it into the eye socket itself. And I also will apply it as well to the other areas of the head as well. But into the eye socket, I apply it. It is a little bit heavy for my likings initially, so I dampen off my brush and then feather out the color just under the eye a bit. In the brow, it's not so bad. And then I also bring it along the sides of the nose, again, just to bring a bit more warmth into there. I also considered touching just the end of his nose with the red a bit, or this Vulpeless Pink, but I decided against that one as well. I apply it into the ear, as ears often will have very reddish tones in them as well. I apply it just very thin, and again, I'm not using this straight out of the bottle. I've thinned this out with just a little bit of water as I do this, and again, I'm doing it onto the cheek as well. And this is again a thinned mixture. This is not right out of the bottle. I use my finger just to feather it out really fast. Because I've thrown on that sealant onto this head, we can do a thing like that, or technique like this, rather than if we had to continue to work right up from the base coat. We possibly could end up wiping away any of our previous effort if we had not sealed it. Mojave White is next. This is going to be for the eyeballs. This is basically a almost like a Screaming Skull in Citadel. It's a off-white. It's not a pure white. Pure stark white eyes would just look a little weird. So here I'm being very, very careful as I pick out the eyeball. I'm trying not to get too far to the edges of the eye, as I want to retain some of that reddish value in there that the Vulpeless Pink gives us. Again, it gives his eyes a little bit more depth, realism. Again, the goal was keep it sort of real, but also keep it kind of dramatic, kind of like the action figures and such. And so that's really what we're going for here. Very carefully, I just do the eyeball, just a quick couple little layerings. I take Citadel Dryad Bark, thin it out just a little bit with the dampness of the brush, and then very carefully I begin laying in the iris of the eye. And as you can see, it pretty much encompasses a majority of the eye, as most human eyes, even in a relaxed position, you don't do just quite a dot. It actually is filling in that entirety of the eyeball. And as you can see, he is kind of staring. He does have an intense look on his face, but, it's Dwayne Johnson. He's kind of an intense guy, I think. So here I'm just very carefully just completing the eye, building it out. There really isn't, in a lot of the pictures that I was referencing, there really isn't a lot of the white of the eye that you see. And so I wanted to make sure that his irises were quite large within the eyeball. Mornfang Brown is next. We're going to slap a little bit onto our palette and then just the dampness of the brush. And we are going to do just a slight little crescent in the bottom portion of what we had done on the Dryad bark. So it's kind of like a little crescent shape, kind of like a little quarter moon kind of thing we're doing under there. And basically we're trying to keep that so that we still have that rimming of dark brown, but we have just a little bit of that very light brown in there, just creating that little bit of a highlight. And if anybody's ever seen the gemstone effects, that's kind of what we're doing. We're building the brighter colors towards the bottom. Snakebite leather contrast is next, and here very carefully I'm applying this right out of the bottle essentially, and I'm just like glazing, we're bringing the darker color up towards the high point, up towards the upper eyelid, but leaving pretty much from the center upwards, and we're trying to keep a lot of the darker tone towards the upper portion of the iris so that we get a little bit more color depth in there. And as you can see, again, his eyes begin to take a bit more realism. Next, we're going to jump into some flat black, and this is obviously for the pupil in his eye. And I do actually make his pupils kind of bigger, and actually not so much that they kind of obliterate the rest of the brown within the eye, but it is probably about half of what I had accomplished with the iris. Again, it was just more or less going off the reference material. Some pictures of Dwayne's eyes look really quite dark, and I still want to retain that that brown. Of course, being that it's The Rock, we could have did his eyes any color, but I thought, a nice dark brown actually would probably be best. Brown gray is next. I'm going to slap a little bit onto my palette, mix this into the dollop of black till it's about, closer to like a 1-to-1 mix ratio, and then begin laying in his eyebrows. Now, this was a challenging one. I had considered not even doing his eyebrows, but I figured, well, I'm looking at his face on my screen, and, he is the inspiration for this, so I figured, no, got to do his eyebrows. And, of course, his eyebrows are on the lower portion of his brow because he has kind of got this furrow to his brow. A little bit more brown gray, pure black, sorry, flat black. And this is at the under portion of the brow that I'm highlighting or shadowing essentially the eyebrow here. And in retrospect, I think I probably could have drawn the eyebrow back a little bit more, I think. Not quite as thick as I have here, but it does get the point across, and it does help, maintain that kind of look that we all expect from this guy. Citadel Ard Coat is next. This is a gloss varnish, and we're just going to apply a fairly generous amount right into the eyes. And this, of course, is to help with the realism of what Dwayne Johnson looks like since this is a sculpture. And of course, I take a little bit here and I add it to his lips as well to give his lips a little bit more depth and, a little bit more realism, and of course, retaining that whole vibe. Of course, one thing I don't show here is that I actually threw a little bit of a highlight into his eyelids and the lid under his eye as well. But if you ever look at any of the photographs that of this piece that I did, they will show that those highlights are there. All I did was take the the golden flesh and the pink flesh mixture and just did that. Huge thank you to all my patrons. Without your support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below, and it'll take you off to a magical website where you can support this channel and everything that I do. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.